Good morning to all of our viewers who are viewing out and back. I have a special guest today, Lee Turlington. And Lee was most recently the Chief Operating Officer of Canada Goose. And he was also the Chief Product Officer of Patagonia. And there were many other senior positions that Lee has taken over the years. I met Lee about 30 years ago, at least, as the Vice President of Marketing for the North Face. And we started to work together on various projects, and we've been good friends ever since. And I'm happy to have Lee on the show today. Lee is also currently a consultant for a lot of companies, and he is a catalyst for change, and I'm very excited to have you on the show.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to see you this morning.
So, right, I look outside now, and we had about 5 or 6 inches in Park City, Utah. We're in the middle of this atmospheric river that has hit California. Yeah. And we don't know whether we're going to get 5 inches or we're going to get 1 inch or we're going to get 50 inches. We have no idea. And I don't think a lot of the weather people either do either. What are you seeing in California right now?
Well, one quick correction in your introduction. I was the Chief Product Officer at Canada Goose, not the Chief Operating Officer.
Okay.
I was involved in a lot of operations there, but there's actually a COO there. So, but yeah, so we got the southern end of that atmospheric river that just flew through the whole of the western North America, frankly. And in our local, pretty much the media here comes out of Los Angeles regional television. And when they speak of snow, they just say feet and they move on. They don't try to predict inches, depth, etc. And you know, it's actually live in the Santa Monica Mountains, where our elevations here is about 800 feet, and there's a coastal ridge between us and the ocean that's about 2,900 feet, and it snowed at the top of that peak or that ridge yesterday, and the snow's gone. But the predictability of weather and the intensity of weather is clearly something. Should say the unpredictability of weather. It's something that we really haven't seen like this in my lifetime, in your lifetime, Paul. We used to be able to. We knew there were going to be dry winters. We knew there were going to be wet winters, and but we didn't. We sort of knew when winter was going to start and stop approximately. What's happening to us across America now. Witness a tornado that drops in and lasts for 230 miles. These are unheard of events of weather that are the result of us heating up the climate and not changing fast enough to protect the world that we live on. And it's a bit of to some a political statement, but to a lot of your audiences and friends and people that you work with and live with in your enterprise in your life, that sentiment and observation is shared by many. So here we had just inland from here, near Santa Clarita, just before you get to the big grapevine that takes I-5 over and into past Bakersfield, and up the inland transit routes. There was 8 inches of rain at altitude at one place, and the burn scars that were left by the fires over the last 3 years. There's a lot of flooding that hasn't stopped yet, and a lot of landsliding that hasn't stopped yet. So we have this cycle of fire, burn, compromised land, compromised watershed, and then when we're fortunate enough to get water into the water table, there's a whole nother event that takes place.
Mhm.
and probably long before we lived on these lands, some events like this were happening, and it was a natural occurrence. Now we've encroached upon those areas, and we're we're living with it.
Do you think that the concerns that you and I clearly have seeped into the C-suite?
I think they have from two directions. I think there is a genuine concern of responsibility and accountability for visionary leaders who understand that either the company that they run or the companies and portfolio that they lead or direct are affecting and utilizing resources that are, you know, adding to the climate change problem, adding to the climate crisis. And I think there are visionary leaders who care. I think there are leaders who are responding to the shareholder in the market who know that they don't address it, they're going to be called out, and um, they're going to be called out by the consumers, but they're also going to be called out by the media because um, the elevation in media consumption throughout the pandemic has also brought forth an intensity of focus around that there actually is a problem, and the it's elevated the politics of it. It's elevated the understanding or lack of understanding of it. It's elevated the information and the misinformation of it. So I'm just glad to know that it's elevated the discussion, and I think that there are those who are responsible and accountable and really want to do something and have impact, and there are those who are responding to the shareholder, their boards, and know that if they don't have it as part of their messaging, their story, their DNA, they're going to be penalized from the business standpoint.
The the shareholders and the board in Wall Street over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of criticism with regard to well, increasing shareholder value at the expense of consumers. Do you believe now that shareholders, consumers, and I think you somewhat addressed this, shareholders, consumers, and even board members are now looking and saying, okay, we have to not only participate in perhaps a solution to carbon loading and the climate change, but what we also have to do is we have to like participate with regard to more and giving more and more money to actual what we consider to be solutions.
Uh, I think I think there's been an increase in focus and investment. I think it's also happened simultaneously to the discussions around how people are treated in the workplace, and we can call that, diversity, inclusion, equity, equanimity. Um, uh, I think those two topics have risen to the surface in a way that have been cause for true action plans and to affect change. Um, I think that the whole notion of climate change and how to have a positive effect on thwarting the contribution to making it worse, it's complicated as hell. I mean, even the best of the best companies in the world who are the most sustainably oriented and have done the most work on a continuous basis to be responsible in how they make things, they too are also harvesting materials from the cracking tower and the oil fields.
Mhm.
And so, can and those things can be done in a continuous basis on a more responsible mode, in a more responsible mode. But I think it's complicated, and I hope it's okay to drop a profanity as a descriptive on the show, but it's going to take some hard work and time to unfuck what we've done.
Yeah. And yes, we you can utilize that language. That word can be used as a verb, an adjective, a noun.
Yes, it can actually.
um, Speaking of the C-suite and speaking of board of directors and and that perspective, let's talk about the supply chain.
Sure.
I'm reading now that the supply chain is starting to loosen up.
Mm-hmm.
That's good news for all of us. When do you think we will be back to normal and the flow of goods as in the United States is going to be pre-pandemic?
I am going to answer your question, but I'm going to give a preamble to the answer.
Okay.
Um, I don't think what we've known as pre-pandemic normal with regards to stocking a shelf, having consumer goods available, um, is going to be the same that it was pre-pandemic ever. I don't. I'm hopeful, and I don't think we're going to have shortages and outages that are going to cause panic again, or that are going to really inhibit our ability to have choice. But I think the idea of the massive, always available everything mentality is a ways out. The mentality is needing to be adjusted. I think the reality of always available, never out, or delivered fully and on time, which is a supply chain acronym DFLOT, um, is it's changed. One of the occurrences, one of the things that has occurred since actually uh, uh, post World War II in Japan, when the whole idea of just-in-time manufacturing was really developed as a concept, a theory, and then an application, and how you manufacture and manage both speedy delivery and very effective inventory management. In the process of making something, anything, um, is that it collided with uh, what happened when the pandemic caused essentially the shutdown of every element of a supply chain of a product.
Mhm.
You take one gear out, and all the others are either spinning or grind to a halt or slow dramatically. And so, although amazing and really a very very important part of quality management, just in time manufacturing kind of collided when those components started to stop. I see physically the manifestation of the supply chain clog right out here in the Pacific Ocean, where I think today there's 92 vessels that are parked somewhere between 8 and 30 miles off San Pedro Harbor, LA Harbor, which is the second busiest port in America, depending on the day. Um,
I
and
think I think it's the busiest port. Those two combined,
Yeah,
Huntington Beach and LA, are the busiest ports. That's the busiest area in the country.
in the nation. Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
um, uh, I don't see the smooth operation or this not being a news topic anymore easily a year out. I think based on my prior companies I worked with, where I worked in, that I still maintain some really good friends at, and then my clients that I have, um, all of them have had to adjust in many different paths of the way that they do business to deal with how they plan and receive materials and goods and communicate with their customers. And so I think we're a ways out. I appreciate and I'm hopeful. I think it is getting better. It's getting better. I think we also, in speaking specifically of America, we have America lives on the interstate system and the truckers. And anybody who doesn't realize that should dig a little deeper in the news. And not only the big trucking line, but the independent trucker carries a lot of the stuff that we use and consume and require in our lives. And so there's a shortage of truckers. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed with regard to channel signal and collecting and measuring product reviews
Yeah.
is about 20 to 25% of the products get a lot of product reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And there is 60 to 70% anyway that don't get, they get very few product reviews and really don't move the market. And I'm wondering if the C-suite, I'm wondering if senior management is now looking at, okay, we've had a supply chain problem. Can the problem at least be eased by taking our product offering down and
Yeah.
not offering every single thing that they possibly can offer?
Yeah. Yeah. This is actually a strategic pivot that's been happening in several brands, top to bottom. From my recent experiences, I've I've been inside the luxury markets, kind of on a global basis, pretty actively. And although Canada Goose is a big player in that world, certainly nowhere the scale of LVMH or the Keurig brands, or even their key venerated competitor Montclair. And there's certainly, an acknowledgement of that in what used to be high frequency prolific creation of collections and therein stock keeping units, SKUs, and styles, which drive the complexity of planning, as well as the consumption of materials. And so in pandemic, there were brands both inside and outside of the outdoor and winter sports business, inside the luxury business, there were some that decided not to do new product lines, and which wasn't a bad idea because especially in outdoor and winter sports and athletic, where a brand that was built on such high performance and high quality may not have required brand new stuff in the level that they had previously been known for. Now you do see this season, and you'll see it across the board, more new, and you're seeing it now, more new product introductions, but less of them. In other words, the quantity of new products that are being launched is tighter, and frankly, I think more impactful. And some of it's driven by supply considerations. Some of it's driven by the recognition that maybe we don't need so many new things now, and also the predictability or lack of predictability of consumer behavior on purchasing behavior, right?
Yeah, let's talk about consumer behavior, because I think that's really interesting. Is that a lot of companies are still attempting, and they should, creating awareness, and that a lot of time is with regard to consumer behavior. But what's interesting now is they do psychological, they do focus groups, they do surveys, they do telephone interviews, they do a lot of things to say, how can we get our mass awareness or mass advertising right? Okay, then it drives it down to the consumer. And what's the very next thing the consumer does? Well, the consumer goes online to look at product reviews. Now, we've talked about climate change. We've talked about the supply chain. What I'd like to discuss now is this great migration to online, and how senior management is looking at changing their management style or changing their business model to a certain extent to accommodate 40 to 50% of their revenue being generated online.
Yeah. I mean, there's a marketing side of that discussion, and then there's an operations side of it. Because still to this day, there are many brands that were built either on only a brick and mortar model or only on a business to business, manufacturer to wholesale model. And those who have succeeded move very, very quickly to become familiar with how to have an omni-channel, multi-channel approach where direct to consumer is a core part of their business. I think anybody who's anybody in an enterprise that's selling to a consumer today is focusing significant energy, strategic thought, and resources on their direct consumer approach, and specifically e-commerce. I think that digital marketing and e-commerce have become the vehicle for storytelling to attract a consumer and keep a consumer close to their brand. Many of the clients that you have, and I mean, it speaks to the quality of thought that Channel Signals always had, are their 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 products are of such quality that the discerning consumer who's shopping in that milieu of product, either because they do an activity or they want to look like they do an activity. Uh, um, I won't say that they're pre-sold, but they use product reviews to really read what other owners and experts are saying authentically about a product and their experience of it. And the story of the brand, the story of the product in the brand, and the review, all of those three things together convert. Um, and so my observation of the brands that I know is that there's continued investment in and innovation in not only e-commerce, but the integrated linkages, the holistic process of digital marketing, communication, storytelling, and the fulfillment through e-commerce. The big, excuse me, not a profanity, but gross visual. The big hairball around this whole thing is returns.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't like something, you send it back right away. Now, this is the percentage of returns in the luxury markets is just um, you got to plan for it as part of your business, and you got to plan for the effect of it on your margin, right? So continuing to get through that as part of the story. I know it's not an insignificant part in outdoor and winter sports and athletic, but I think probably in luxury it's higher. So that's in summary, continued evolution, continued innovation, and continued investment. If you're not playing, you're out.
Because what we're seeing with regard to our customers and our prospects is that they're looking at the big storyline of their brand. And then what they're also trying to do is marry that with the storyline of the thousands of consumers who are talking about their experiences with the product. So I think you're so right in the fact that from the e-commerce side, it has to go from the big awareness message tying into at least what's going on with the consumer message, which brings me to our final topic, which is the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
And I mean, my inbox is full of LinkedIn saying, here is every CEO that I talk to says we're hiring on LinkedIn. And they can't find the people. When what I read this morning also is that a lot of this resignation are from people 60 plus who have either sold their house or have a good retirement package and say, okay, that's enough. Now, that's a lot of what the Great Resignation is. But can you lend some light on uh, why companies can't get these employees back?
Yeah, I can probably lend more of an opinion than I can light because it's there are a lot of there are a lot of consultants trying to figure this out at McKinsey and Bain and Boston Consulting Group. Um, I like to refer to it as the great personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
And um, let's start with the uh, psychographic group you just referred to, which is closer to you and I than others. I'm trying to remember where I read this yesterday. It might have been in Bloomberg Business that some crazy number like every 2 minutes somebody turns 65 in America.
Mm-hmm.
So the 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 baby boomers, the boomers, affectionately known as, there's a huge knowledgeable workforce that some of which 60 plus chose to leave earlier because of the pandemic, because of the financial rewards of the markets, because they were either by choice or by force. They have a personal choice that they're making about how and where to live. Um, and those who are fortunate enough to have those choices. So I think you have that group where I read a lot from a known, previously known as a geriatricist or geriatric thinker, um, uh, Dr. Ken Dykewald, who talks about what retirees want. And you've probably heard me talk about this before, where you got in this age group that we're talking about, retiring is kind of a language that was the generation before us, or your and my parents' generation, where the notion of you're going to work hard, work like hell, you're going to get to a point, you're going to have a nest egg, you will have raised a family, you have the house, and so on and so forth. And then you're going to go on your your journeys, right?
Going to go on the cruise.
Well, yeah. Well, if you look up in the dictionary the word retire in the Oxford Dictionary, the first line in the definition is the act of preparing to or going to sleep. So I don't know about you, but I ain't going to sleep.
I got bigger plans than that.
I think so. Present act and process. Let's go back to the younger age group. As you know, I have a 22-year-old son who's a senior in college, and he's looking at his future and considering what to do. I have a lot of really talented, smart people that I've worked with in the companies I've been in over the great brands I've been in over the years, and uh, and people are making a choice now. Somehow, in this discussion about the Great Resignation, there's an element that's being forgotten to discuss because a lot of, if not every, company around the world, when the pandemic basically compressed the economy and consumption stopped, brands and companies laid off and furloughed massive numbers of people of all ages and types.
Mhm.
And so now, as things opened up and lifted up, those companies are reemploying, unfurloughing, and activating again. And they need more people to be able to do this work. And even though offices are not opening up, I think people who were in companies and brands before who felt that their choices to be in those were structured in a way of convention and this is what I must do. This is the path I must take, you know, uh, and then sometimes find themselves in either unfulfilling work, toxic work environments, don't have a voice in what's happening with the enterprise that they're operating in, service jobs that are either unfulfilling or you might be not treated well in those service jobs. I think that the pandemic, uh, the reality of the pandemic and the physical acts that occurred in businesses shrinking, furloughing, and then at the kind of the entry level positions in the service industries and service roles. When the government began to support people with income, I think that too had an effect. I'm not suggesting that people are not going back to work just because they were getting a check from the government, but that probably occurs somewhere. So I prefer to think of it as the great personal choice
Mhm.
because now all of a sudden, it's supply and demand, Paul. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
there's a supply and demand, and now there's a personal choice that's weighing into this in a way that had not before, where you actually can get to choose to live where you want to live without boundaries to some degree. Um, so um, we certainly haven't seen the last of it. I'm glad to see for those kids who graduated in high school online or graduated from college with one person 100 feet away from them. Those those kids. That's a tough thing to go through, and then the uncertainty of how and where they're going to live, and put a roof over their head and food on the table for themselves, um, is a very very uncharted territory. So
Mhm.
um, uh, I don't think it's just about, damn it, I'm not going to take it anymore. And some of the stories that we hear of the crazy interviews that are occurring where the interviewee is telling the interviewer what they want, otherwise they're out. I don't. I think those are exceptional stories. So, I
Yeah.
again, I prefer to view it as the great personal choice, and I think that to try to homogenize the profile of the Great Resignation is just a bit oversimplification.
I love that, and I will. If I'm going to repurpose that is the great personal choice, because I think you're exactly right. Lee Turlington, I want to thank you for joining us today on Out and Back. It has been a terrific interview with great insights, and again, thanks for your time.
Paul, thank you. I'm honored to be included. My best wishes to you and Allison and your whole channel Sugar Crew for Merry Christmas.
All right, Merry Christmas to you and Margie and Harrison. Talk
Thank
to
you,
you.
Paul. Bye bye.